I'm Merritt Calloway 29, and I just watched my parents hand my sister a check for $6.5 million while telling me I needed to learn the value of hard work. What they didn't know was that Grandpa had overheard everything and he had plans of his own that would turn our entire family dynamic upside down. Before I dive into this family revenge drama that changed everything, I'd love to know where you're watching from. If my story of family betrayal and unexpected karma resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of real-life drama enthusiasts. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how justice gets served in the most satisfying way. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up in the affluent suburbs of Boston, I always knew there was a difference in how my parents treated me and my older sister, Vanessa. Our sprawling colonial home with its manicured lawns and heated swimming pool was the backdrop to a childhood that looked perfect from the outside but harbored deep inequalities within. Vanessa was the golden child captain of the debate team valedictorian and eventually Harvard Law graduate. Every achievement was celebrated with lavish gifts and endless praise. When she got accepted to Harvard, our parents bought her a brand new Mercedes. When she passed the bar exam, they took her on a month-long European vacation. Her bedroom walls were adorned with framed certificates and trophies that our mother polished weekly. Meanwhile, I was labeled the family disappointment early on. Not because I was failing, I maintained a solid B+ average, but because I wasn't exceptional like Vanessa. My interests in photography and creative writing were dismissed as hobbies rather than legitimate pursuits. When I got accepted to NYU with a partial scholarship for photojournalism, my father's response was, "At least you got in somewhere." There was no car, no celebration dinner, just a reluctant check for the remaining tuition with the reminder that I better make something of myself. The disparity wasn't just in celebrations, it was in the daily interactions too. My mother would call Vanessa for advice on investments or family decisions, while I was lucky to receive a cursory update about family matters. My father proudly introduced Vanessa as my daughter the lawyer, while I was just my other daughter. The cumulative effect of these small cuts was a deep-seated insecurity that followed me into adulthood. After graduation, I built a modest career as a photojournalist, covering local stories for Boston publications before landing a job with a respected national magazine. I wasn't making millions, but I was financially independent and doing work I loved. My apartment was small but filled with books and photos that told the story of a life well lived on my own terms. I dated occasionally, but remained focused on building my career, knowing that professional success was the only language my parents understood. Vanessa, meanwhile, married Bradley Wellington III, a finance executive whose family connections rivaled our own. They purchased a brownstone in Beacon Hill with help from our parents and began the picture-perfect life that had always been expected of her. The wedding was a $200,000 affair that my parents paid for entirely. When I got engaged briefly at 26, my father made it clear I would need to foot most of the bill myself because Vanessa's wedding had set a standard. The engagement didn't last, partly because of my ex-fiancé's discomfort with my family dynamic. "They treat you like you're less than," he said during our breakup. "And what bothers me most is that you've accepted it." I hadn't accepted it, not really. I had just learned to live with it, to build a life outside their approval. But the wound remained open, festering beneath the surface of every family dinner and holiday gathering. I became expert at deflection, changing the subject whenever my mother began comparing my modest one-bedroom apartment to Vanessa's five-bedroom home, or when my father questioned why I wasn't pursuing a real career with actual prospects. What they didn't know, what I never shared with them, was that my work was gaining recognition in journalistic circles. I had been nominated for an Emerging Talent Award and was working on a photo essay about wealth disparity that had caught the attention of several major publications. I kept these achievements to myself, tired of having them diminished or dismissed. Last Thanksgiving, when Vanessa announced her pregnancy at the dinner table, my mother burst into tears of joy while my father opened an expensive bottle of champagne he'd been saving for a special occasion. I sat quietly offering congratulations while wondering if anything I could ever do would elicit such a reaction. The answer I suspected was no. Little did I know that everything was about to change, that the family dynamic I had grown to accept was about to be shattered by a single meeting that would expose decades of favoritism for what it truly was, not just parental preference, but a calculated financial strategy that would leave me reeling. It was a crisp Sunday in October when my father called a family financial meeting. These meetings were rare but always significant, typically involving estate planning or major investment decisions. The formal tone of his email suggested this wasn't a casual gathering, so I rescheduled a photography assignment and made the 40-minute drive to my parents' home, curious but apprehensive. The family room was arranged like a boardroom. My father sat at the head of the table with leather portfolios placed precisely at each seat. My mother perched beside him, nervously adjusting her pearl necklace. Vanessa and Bradley arrived 10 minutes after me. Vanessa visibly pregnant now at 5 months, Bradley checking his watch as though he had more important places to be. "We've called you here to discuss the future," my father began, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he'd perfected over decades as CEO of his own company. "Your mother and I have made some decisions about our estate that we want to share with you now rather than leave them as surprises after we're gone." My grandfather, my father's father, had also been invited. Grandpa George was 82 and still sharp as a tack. A self-made man who had built a construction empire from nothing, he had always been the family member I felt most connected to. He understood hard work and never seemed impressed by Vanessa's pedigree in the way my parents were. He sat quietly in the corner, observing rather than participating, his weathered hands folded over his cane. "As you know, your mother and I have been blessed financially," my father continued. "We've worked hard to build our wealth and want to ensure it continues to grow for generations to come." He slid the portfolios toward us. Inside were detailed financial statements, investment records, and legal documents. As I flipped through mine, confusion gave way to disbelief, then to a sick feeling in my stomach. "We've decided to make an advance on Vanessa's inheritance," my father announced. "We're transferring $6.5 million to her and Bradley now to help them establish a proper trust for the baby and expand their investment portfolio." Vanessa beamed, clutching Bradley's hand. "Thank you, Daddy. This means so much to us, especially with the baby coming." My father nodded approvingly before turning to me. His expression shifted subtly, a mixture of disappointment and what almost looked like pity. "Merritt," he said my name, sounding foreign on his lips. "Your mother and I have discussed your situation at length." "My situation," I echoed, already feeling the familiar sting of being the family disappointment. "Your career choices," he clarified, as if I'd misunderstood something obvious. "While we respect your independence, we're concerned about your financial future." My mother interjected, her voice softened in a way that always preceded criticism. "Honey, you've always done things your own way. And while that's charming, we worry that you haven't planned properly for retirement or potential emergencies." "What your mother is trying to say," my father continued, "is that we've decided not to advance your portion of the inheritance." The room fell silent. Even Vanessa had the decency to look uncomfortable. "We believe," my father pressed on, "that you need to learn the value of building your own wealth. It's a lesson we perhaps should have enforced earlier." I stared at the documents before me, not an inheritance plan for me, but a financial literacy packet complete with basic investment advice and retirement planning strategies. As if I were financially illiterate rather than simply working in a field that didn't generate millions. "So Vanessa gets $6.5 million now, and I get a pamphlet on how to open an IRA." My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. Don't be dramatic, Merritt, my mother sighed. You'll still inherit eventually. We just think Vanessa and her family have demonstrated financial responsibility that warrants our confidence now. Bradley cleared his throat. If I may, Richard Catherine, this decision shows tremendous foresight. We've already discussed using part of these funds to establish a legacy investment that could benefit the entire family for generations. My father nodded approvingly while I fought the urge to throw my water in Bradley's smug face. The entire family he referred to clearly didn't include me in any meaningful way. From his corner, Grandpa George watched the proceedings with an unreadable expression. His eyes, sharp and observant, moved from my father to me, then to the check that now sat before Vanessa like a trophy. Is there something you want to add, Merritt? My father asked, interpreting my silence as acceptance. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to demand an explanation for a lifetime of being treated as less than. Instead, I took a deep breath and closed the insulting portfolio. Congratulations, Vanessa, I said, standing up. I have a deadline tomorrow, so I should get going. As I reached the door, I heard Grandpa George's chair scrape against the hardwood floor. I think I'll head out too, he announced. Merritt, would you mind giving me a lift home? My driver's on break. In the car, Grandpa was unnervingly quiet. When we reached his sprawling Victorian home, he patted my hand gently. Come inside for a moment, would you? There's something I'd like to discuss. I followed him, unaware that this conversation would be the first domino in a series of events that would completely transform our family forever. Grandpa George's home was a stark contrast to my parents' modern mansion. While they embraced sleek minimalism and contemporary art, his Victorian maintained its original character, ornate woodwork, stained glass, and furniture that told stories of decades past. It smelled of leather-bound books and the pipe tobacco he'd given up years ago but whose scent had permanently infused the walls. Bourbon, he offered, making his way to a crystal decanter in his study. God, yes, I replied, sinking into a worn leather chair that had cradled 3 generations of our family. He poured 2 glasses and handed one to me, then lowered himself carefully into his chair across from mine. For a moment we sat in companionable silence, the only sound the ticking of an antique grandfather clock that had belonged to his father. Your father, he finally said, swirling his bourbon thoughtfully, was born into privilege. I made sure of that. I nodded, familiar with our family history. Grandpa had built his construction company from nothing, working his way up from day laborer to foreman to owner. By the time my father was in college, the company was worth millions. What you might not know, he continued, is that I started with nothing. My father, your great-grandfather, was a janitor who drank away half his paycheck. We lived in a 1-room apartment with my 3 siblings. I started working at 12, lying about my age to get jobs on construction sites. This was new information. My father rarely spoke about Grandpa's background, focusing instead on the success story, the wealth, the legacy. I wanted better for your father, Grandpa said. I wanted him to have every advantage I didn't. But I think... He paused, taking a long sip of bourbon. I think I made a grave mistake. What do you mean I made his life too easy? Gave him everything without making him earn it. And look what he's become, a man who measures worth in dollars, who can't see the value in a daughter like you because you don't fit his narrow definition of success. My eyes stung with unexpected tears. To have someone in the family, especially Grandpa, acknowledge what I had felt for years was overwhelming. What happened in there today, he continued, was wrong. Not just unfair, morally wrong. Your sister has never wanted for anything. You've fought for every opportunity, built something meaningful on your own terms. He set down his glass and leaned forward. Did you know I follow your work? I blinked in surprise. You do, he nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. That series you did on the fishing community in Gloucester, powerful stuff. You've got a gift, Merritt. You see, people really see them. Your father has never understood that some contributions can't be measured on a balance sheet. Grandpa reached for a folder on his desk and handed it to me. Inside was a collection of my published work, photographs, and articles I'd written over the years, carefully clipped and preserved. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. "And I'm not going to let your father's warped values punish you for having integrity and pursuing meaningful work." He stood up, moving to a painting on the wall, a simple landscape that I'd always admired. He swung it aside, revealing a wall safe. After entering the combination, he removed a thick envelope and several legal documents. "Your father doesn't know this," he said, returning to his seat, "but I never transferred full ownership of Callaway Construction to him. I maintained 51% of the shares in a holding company that I control. He runs the day-to-day operations, but major decisions, including the eventual sale or transfer of the company, require my approval." This revelation stunned me. My father had always spoken as if the company were entirely his, a narrative Grandpa had apparently never corrected. "I've also been much more careful with my personal investments than your father realizes," Grandpa continued. "He believes most of my wealth is tied up in the company and a few properties. The reality is quite different." He slid the documents across to me. As I read through them, my hands began to shake. Grandpa had accumulated a separate fortune through decades of shrewd investments, technology stocks purchased in their infancy, real estate in areas before they boomed, angel investments in startups that had grown exponentially. "I've amended my will," he said quietly. "The controlling interest in the company will be placed in a trust that you'll manage. Your father will maintain his position as CEO, but you'll have final say on major decisions. And my personal estate, separate from the company, will pass directly to you." The figures before me were staggering, nearly triple what my father had just given Vanessa. "Grandpa, I can't." "You can and you will," he interrupted firmly. "This isn't about money, Merritt. It's about rectifying an injustice and ensuring the family legacy is guided by someone with both integrity and compassion." He took my hand, his grip surprisingly strong for a man his age. "But we're going to do this carefully. Your father doesn't need to know about any of this yet. I'm not planning on dying anytime soon." He winked. "This stays between us until the time is right." "What about Vanessa?" I asked, still processing the magnitude of what he was proposing. "Your sister will be fine. She has her $6.5 million and whatever else your parents leave her. More importantly, she has exactly the life she wants. But you, my dear, have been denied the recognition and support you deserve." "I'm simply restoring balance." He refilled our glasses. "Now, here's what we're going to do. You'll continue your work, continue building your career on your own terms. But I'd like you to spend more time with me, ostensibly to help organize my personal affairs and document family history through photographs. It will give us cover to work on the transition plan for when the time comes." I nodded slowly, my mind racing with implications. This wasn't just about money, it was about power, influence, and the chance to reshape our family's values. "One more thing," Grandpa added, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I think it's time I became a more visible patron of the arts. Starting with an anonymous donation to fund that extensive photo documentary project you mentioned, wanting to pursue the one about wealth disparity in America. Seems fitting, doesn't it?" For the first time since the devastating family meeting, I laughed. Perfectly fitting. We clinked glasses, conspirators in a plan that would unfold over the coming months, a plan that would eventually force my family to confront their own hypocrisy and re-examine what truly constitutes value, success, and legacy. 6 months passed in a blur of activity. While my parents believed I was simply helping Grandpa George organize his personal archives, we were meticulously putting his plan into motion. I spent weekends at his Victorian digitizing old photographs and documents, legitimate work that provided perfect cover for our clandestine financial restructuring. The anonymous grant funding my documentary series on wealth inequality in America had raised my professional profile considerably. I was traveling across the country, capturing powerful images of both extreme wealth and devastating poverty, often thinking about the irony of my own family's situation as I worked. The series was generating buzz in photojournalism circles, with several prestigious galleries expressing interest in hosting exhibitions. Vanessa had given birth to a son named Richard George Wellington after both our father and grandfather. My parents were besotted with their first grandchild, spending lavishly on nursery furniture, baby clothes from European boutiques, and setting up a college fund before he could even hold his head up. I visited dutifully, took the obligatory aunt photographs, and maintained the facade of the supportive sister while watching my parents continue their pattern of disproportionate devotion. Meanwhile, Grandpa's health had begun to decline subtly at first, then more noticeably. Nothing critical, just the natural progression of age accelerated by a minor heart scare. He refused to slow down, insisting on maintaining his regular schedule of company board meetings and investment reviews. Only I noticed the increased frequency of his rest periods and the new medications lined up in his bathroom cabinet. I was in Chicago, photographing the contrast between the gleaming financial district and the struggling South Side neighborhoods, when I received the call from my mother. "Your grandfather's in the hospital," she said, her voice tight with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "He had a significant cardiac event during a meeting with your father. The doctors are cautiously optimistic, but you should come home." I caught the first flight back to Boston, my mind racing with fears not just for Grandpa's health, but for our unfinished plan. Had he revealed anything to my father during their meeting, would all his careful preparations be undermined if he wasn't able to execute the final pieces? When I arrived at Massachusetts General Hospital, I found my family assembled in the private waiting room that their substantial donations had secured. My mother was flipping nervously through a magazine without reading it. My father paced by the window, his expression unreadable. Vanessa sat with the baby sleeping in her designer stroller, while Bradley worked on his laptop in the corner. "How is he?" I asked, setting down my camera bag. "Stable," my father replied curtly. "They're running tests. The cardiologist will update us soon." There was something strange about his demeanor, a tension beyond normal concern for his father's health. Before I could analyze it further, the doctor arrived, clipboard in hand. "The Calloway family," he confirmed, glancing around the room. "Mr. George Calloway is doing well, all things considered." The catheterization showed a 70% blockage in one coronary artery, which we've stented successfully. His cardiac enzymes indicate a minor heart attack, but there's minimal damage to the heart muscle itself. Collective relief filled the room, though. My father's shoulders remained rigid. "He's asking to see someone named Merritt," the doctor continued, looking at his notes. "He was quite insistent." My father's head snapped up. "I'm his son. I should see him first." The doctor looked uncomfortable. He specifically requested Miss Merritt Calloway. He was very clear about wanting to see her alone before anyone else. My mother frowned. "That's odd. Richard is his son and business partner." Nevertheless, the doctor said firmly, "Patient wishes take precedence. If you'll come with me, Miss Calloway." As I followed the doctor, I felt my father's gaze burning into my back. Something had happened between them, something that had created this new tension. Grandpa looked smaller against the white hospital sheets, monitors beeping steadily beside him. His face brightened when he saw me, and he gestured for me to close the door. "Perfect timing," he said, his voice weaker than usual, but his eyes sharp as ever. "Though I wouldn't have chosen a heart attack as our accelerant." "What happened, Grandpa?" With Dad, he adjusted himself carefully against the pillows. "Your father called an emergency board meeting this morning. He wanted to discuss liquidating some company assets to fund a new venture with Bradley. Something about cryptocurrency investment opportunities." He rolled his eyes. When I questioned the wisdom of diverting company resources into your brother-in-law's speculative schemes, especially after the substantial gift they'd already received, your father grew frustrated. And that's when you had the heart attack. Convenient timing, wasn't it? He chuckled, then winced. But it did prevent me from having to explicitly block his proposal. Instead, the meeting adjourned in chaos as they called the ambulance. He reached for a water cup and I held it to his lips. After drinking, he continued, "What your father doesn't know is that I finalized the amendments to my will and the company trust documents last week. Everything is in place, Merritt. My attorney has instructions to file everything immediately if my condition worsens." Relief washed over me, followed quickly by guilt. Here he was recovering from a heart attack and I was worried about financial arrangements. "Don't look so conflicted," he said, reading my expression with his usual acuity. "This was never just about money. It's about justice and family values. Now I need you to be prepared. Your father suspects something." The questions he was asking today about company ownership structures were too specific to be coincidental. "Do you think someone told him about your plans?" Grandpa shook his head. "No, but he's not stupid. He's likely noticed the time we've been spending together, maybe had his assistant look into recent legal filings. He doesn't know details, but he senses something's changing. I would have to watch myself on this incredible journey as things continued to unfold. If you're still with me and resonating with this story of family dynamics and hidden justice, this would be a perfect moment to hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories of family drama and sweet revenge. I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments about whether you've ever witnessed favoritism in families and how it affected relationships. Trust me, what happens next in my story might surprise you. He took my hand, squeezing it with surprising strength. "Listen carefully. When I'm discharged, I'll be staying at your apartment for a while, not my house. We'll say it's because your place is single level and easier for my recovery. The real reason is that I need to be away from your father's daily scrutiny while we expedite the final steps of our plan." I nodded, mind racing with logistics. My small one-bedroom would need significant rearrangement to accommodate Grandpa's needs. "There's a safe deposit box at Boston Trust," he continued. "The key is in my desk drawer at home, inside the false bottom of the right middle drawer. Inside the box are documents your father must never find: original ownership certificates, digital backup drives, account information. Retrieve them tomorrow before anyone thinks to look." The gravity of our conspiracy was hitting me fully now. This wasn't just rectifying an injustice, it was a complete reversal of family power dynamics that would leave my father and sister reeling. "Are you sure about all this, Grandpa? It's going to cause an explosion in the family." His expression hardened. "The explosion has been building for decades, Merritt. Your father created this situation with years of favoritism and short-sighted values. Actions have consequences. It's time he learned that." A nurse poked her head in to check vitals, reminding us that our private conversation had gone on long enough. As she recorded Grandpa's blood pressure, he gave me a meaningful look. "Tell your father I'm too tired for visitors today. I need rest. Tomorrow will be soon enough for family visits." I understood what he was doing, buying time, keeping my father at a distance until we could secure the critical documents. I squeezed his hand in acknowledgement before leaving. In the waiting room, my father immediately intercepted me. "What did he say? What did you discuss for so long?" "He's tired," I replied, maintaining a neutral expression. "The doctor wants him to rest. He asked that everyone come back tomorrow when he's stronger." My father's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "He spoke to you for 20 minutes just to tell you he's tired." "We talked about my photo project I improvised. He's been following its progress." "Dad, he had a heart attack today. Can we focus on his health instead of interrogating me about our conversation?" My mother placed a restraining hand on my father's arm. Richard, please. This isn't helping anyone. Let's go home and come back in the morning when he's rested. As we gathered our things to leave, I caught Bradley watching me with an odd expression, calculating as if reassessing me in some fundamental way. Had he noticed something? Was he picking up on the tension between my father and me? I would need to be more careful around him. What none of us realized was that the next 24 hours would completely transform our family dynamic, revealing secrets that went far beyond Grandpa's plan for financial justice, secrets that would force each of us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about our family history. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching my anxious mood as I made my way to Grandpa's Victorian. Using the spare key he'd given me months ago, I let myself in, listening for any signs that someone else might be there. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock and the occasional creak of settling floorboards. I moved quickly to the study and located the desk drawer Grandpa had mentioned. The false bottom was cleverly disguised. I would never have found it without specific instructions. Inside was a small brass key with a numbered tag from Boston Trust. I pocketed it and carefully replaced the false bottom, leaving everything exactly as I had found it. As I turned to leave, a file folder on Grandpa's desk caught my attention, one I hadn't noticed during our many work sessions. The label read simply, Richard Truth, my father's name. Something told me this was important. I opened it quickly, heart pounding. Inside were documents that made no sense at first glance: a birth certificate for my father, but with a different mother's name than my grandmother's. Hospital records. Adoption papers. Letters between Grandpa and a woman named Eleanor Winters dating back to 1958. Stunned, I sat heavily in Grandpa's chair, scanning the papers with growing disbelief. The story they told was astonishing. My father was not biologically Grandpa's son. He had been born to Eleanor Winters, Grandpa's secretary, after a brief affair during a rough patch in his marriage. My grandfather had adopted him legally when he was 3 months old, with Eleanor relinquishing her parental rights in exchange for a financial settlement that had allowed her to start a new life in California. My grandmother, the woman I had known as my grandmother until her death 10 years ago, had agreed to raise my father as her own on the condition that he would never know the truth. She had been unable to have children of her own due to complications from a previous miscarriage. The most recent document in the file was a letter from Grandpa to Eleanor dated just 2 months ago. Eleanor, after all these years, I find myself questioning the promise we made. Richard has become a man driven by material wealth and status, qualities I fear stem from my own failings as a father. I gave him everything, trying to compensate for the secret we kept, and in doing so, I may have prevented him from developing the character that comes from overcoming hardship. He now treats his younger daughter, Merritt, with the same conditional love that I fear I showed him, measuring her worth by financial success rather than character. The cycle continues, and I find myself responsible for 2 generations of damage. I've enclosed recent photographs of your granddaughters. Vanessa resembles you around the eyes, though she doesn't have your warmth. Merritt has your creative spirit and resilience. I see much of you in her. I'm considering revealing the truth to Richard. After 65 years, perhaps honesty is the only gift of value I can still offer him. I welcome your thoughts. With enduring respect, George. My hands trembled as I carefully returned the documents to their folder. This changed everything, not just our financial situation, but our entire family history. Did my father know? Had Grandpa told him during their meeting yesterday, precipitating the heart attack? Is that why my father had been so tense at the hospital? I had no time to process this bombshell. I needed to get to the bank before it closed, then check on Grandpa at the hospital. I quickly photographed the key documents with my phone, replaced the folder exactly as I'd found it, and left. At Boston Trust, a discreet banker led me to the vault upon verification of my identity and the key. The safe deposit box contained exactly what Grandpa had described: original stock certificates showing the true ownership structure of Callaway Construction, with 51% held by Grandpa's separate holding company. Digital drives labeled financial records 1,980 present, and a sealed envelope with my name written in Grandpa's distinctive handwriting. I opened it immediately, finding a handwritten note. Merritt, if you're reading this, circumstances have forced our timeline to accelerate. Inside this box is everything you need to assume control when the time comes. The attorney to contact is James Harrington. His card is enclosed. He has copies of all documents and clear instructions. There's another matter you may discover in the course of these events, a family secret I've kept for over 6 decades. Whatever happens, remember that family is about love and values, not just blood. Your father needs to learn this lesson, though it may come at a high cost. You have always been my true heir in spirit, regardless of biology. Trust yourself to lead with wisdom and compassion. All my love, Grandpa. The note confirmed my suspicions. Grandpa had been considering revealing my father's true parentage, perhaps had even done so yesterday. I gathered everything, secured it in my messenger bag, and headed to the hospital, my mind reeling. When I arrived, the scene that greeted me was chaos. My mother was crying in the hallway outside Grandpa's room. My father was engaged in a heated argument with a doctor and hospital administrator. Vanessa and Bradley stood to the side, looking uncomfortable and confused. "What's happening?" I asked, my heart sinking. "Your grandfather discharged himself against medical advice," she sobbed. "He just got up, got dressed, and walked out an hour ago. Your father is beside himself. The hospital says they couldn't legally stop him." "Did he say where he was going?" "That's the strangest part," my mother said, lowering her voice. "He left a note saying he was going to stay with you during his recovery." "But that can't be right. He didn't even tell you he was leaving the hospital today." So Grandpa had accelerated our plan without warning me. He must have felt truly threatened by whatever had transpired with my father. "Actually," I said carefully, "we had discussed it. I just didn't think it would be this soon. I was getting my apartment ready for him." My father broke away from his conversation with the medical staff and stalked toward me, his face flushed with anger. "Did you know about this? Did you help him leave?" "No, Dad. I'm as surprised as you are that he left today. But he did mention wanting to stay with me during recovery because my apartment doesn't have stairs." "This is completely irresponsible," my father fumed. "He needs medical monitoring. Your apartment isn't equipped for someone in his condition. He belongs either here or at his own home where we can arrange proper care." What he meant, I suspected, was somewhere he could control access and information. "Dad, Grandpa is a competent adult who can make his own decisions," I said firmly. "If he wants to stay with me, that's his choice. I'll make sure he has everything he needs." "This isn't about stairs or convenience," my father said, lowering his voice to an angry hiss. "This is about whatever you two have been plotting for months. Don't think I haven't noticed the time you've been spending together, the hushed conversations that stop when I enter a room." So he had noticed. But how much did he know I've been helping him organize family archives and documenting his stories about building the company? I replied, the prepared cover story coming easily. "He's been interested in my photography work. There's no plot, Dad. Just a grandfather connecting with his granddaughter." My father studied my face, looking for signs of deception. He said things yesterday, made accusations and claims that made no sense. "I need to speak with him privately without your interference." "What kind of claims?" I asked, testing whether the adoption revelation had indeed come out. A shadow crossed my father's face. "Nothing that concerns you. Family business, company matters," so he wasn't ready to share that bombshell. Interesting. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "It's George. I'm at your apartment. All is well. Stay calm. Relief flooded through me, at least Grandpa was safe. I need to go, I said, gathering my bag. If Grandpa's at my place, I should be there to help him get settled. I'm coming with you, my father insisted. That's not a good idea, I countered. He clearly wants some space right now. Let me get him situated, make sure he's comfortable, and I'll have him call you once he's rested. Before my father could protest further, Bradley stepped forward. Richard, perhaps we should respect George's wishes for now. The doctor said stress could trigger another cardiac event. Let's give him some time to recover before confronting him. I shot Bradley a surprised look. Was he actually helping me? His expression revealed nothing. My father hesitated, then reluctantly nodded. Fine. But I expect a call from him today, Merritt. And this conversation isn't over. As I left the hospital, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change, that decades of family dynamics were barreling toward an explosive reckoning with me standing at ground zero. When I arrived at my apartment, I found Grandpa comfortably settled in my living room, looking remarkably composed for someone who had just checked himself out of a hospital following a heart attack. He wore casual clothes I'd never seen on him before, jeans, and a Henley shirt that made him look younger somehow. You shouldn't have left the hospital without telling me, I scolded, gently setting down my bag. No time, he replied simply. Your father was planning to return this morning with a private nurse and move me back to my house. I overheard him arranging it on the phone last night after you left. Dad's furious, I said, sinking onto the couch beside him. He knows we're up to something but doesn't have the details. And Grandpa, I found the file about my father's adoption. Grandpa's expression softened. Ah, I wondered if you might. It was perhaps careless to leave it out, but part of me wanted you to know before everything comes to light. Did you tell him? Is that what happened at the meeting before your heart attack? He shook his head. No. I came close, had the file with me in fact, but then he started pushing this cryptocurrency venture with Bradley talking about liquidating company assets for it. When I resisted, he became uncharacteristically aggressive, questioning whether I was still competent to make financial decisions. That's when you had the heart attack. Convenient timing, he said with a wry smile. Though not entirely coincidental. The stress certainly didn't help my ticker. I filled him in on retrieving the safe deposit box contents and the scene at the hospital. He listened attentively, occasionally nodding. Your father will be here soon, he said, when I finished. The call you promised won't satisfy him. He'll come himself, probably with Bradley in tow. Should we be worried about that? No, Grandpa said firmly. In fact, it's exactly what we need. It's time for everything to be revealed, all the secrets, all the plans. Are you sure? You just had a heart attack. Maybe we should wait until you're stronger. His expression hardened. I'm 82, Merritt. Stronger isn't in my future. This needs to happen now while I can control the narrative and support you through the aftermath. We spent the next hour preparing, arranging documents in strategic order, setting up my laptop with digital files easily accessible. Grandpa insisted on sitting in my most comfortable chair, positioned to face the door. I made coffee and set out cups, an oddly domestic detail, for what promised to be an explosive confrontation. The doorbell rang precisely at 2 p.m. Grandpa had called it. My father stood there with Bradley beside him. Where is he? My father demanded, pushing past me without a greeting. Grandpa raised a hand in calm greeting from his chair. Hello, Richard. Bradley, please come in and sit down. We have much to discuss. My father assessed the room with a quick glance, noting the documents arranged on the coffee table, the formal way Grandpa had positioned himself. What is this? He asked, suspicion evident. Some sort of intervention. You could call it that, Grandpa replied mildly. Though perhaps reckoning would be more accurate. Bradley remained standing by the door as if ensuring he could make a quick exit if necessary. My father reluctantly sat on the edge of my sofa, his posture rigid. First, Grandpa began my health. I'm fine. The stent is doing its job and I'm on medication. I've arranged for a private nurse to visit daily, but I will be staying here with Merritt for the foreseeable future. This is ridiculous, my father interrupted. Your house has a full staff. You'd be much more comfortable there. Comfort isn't my priority at the moment. Privacy is. Grandpa nodded to me, and I handed him the first folder of documents. Let's begin with Callaway Construction. You've been operating under a misapprehension for many years, Richard. My father frowned. What are you talking about? You believe you own the company. You don't. You never have. Grandpa passed the stock certificates across to my father. I maintained 51% ownership through a separate holding company. You run operations, yes, but major decisions have always required my approval. My father's face paled as he examined the documents. This can't be legal. You told me when I took over as CEO that the company was mine. I told you it was yours to run, Grandpa corrected. I never said anything about ownership. That was your assumption, one I chose not to correct for many years. Why are you showing me this now? My father demanded. Because it's time you understood the full picture before I transfer that controlling interest to someone else. My father's head snapped up. Transferred to whom? Bradley has the business acumen to. Not Bradley, Grandpa interrupted. Merritt. The silence that followed was deafening. My father stared at me as if seeing a stranger. That's absurd, he finally sputtered. She knows nothing about running a construction company. She's a photographer. She's intelligent, ethical, and has a vision beyond profit margins, Grandpa replied calmly. The company will continue daily operations as usual with the current management team. But major decisions, expansions, acquisitions, those will require Merritt's approval as trustee of my controlling interest. Bradley finally spoke from his position by the door. George, while I respect your right to distribute your assets as you see fit, this decision seems unconventional. Perhaps we could discuss alternatives that would keep the company within the traditional family business structure. By traditional, you mean male-dominated? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Or just limited to those who studied business rather than arts. Bradley had the grace to look uncomfortable. I simply meant, I know what you meant, Grandpa cut in. And no, this isn't open for negotiation. The documents are finalized and filed. My father had been silently flipping through the certificates, his expression darkening. You've been planning this for months, years maybe. He turned to me accusingly. This is why you've been spending so much time with him. Not family archives, this betrayal. It's not betrayal to correct an injustice, I replied quietly. You and Mom gave Vanessa $6.5 million while telling me I needed to learn the value of hard work. Did you ever consider how that felt? After a lifetime of being the other daughter, the disappointment who chose the wrong career, we were trying to teach you responsibility, my father insisted. And clearly we failed since your response is to go behind our backs to steal your sister's birthright. It was never her birthright, Grandpa said firmly. Nor yours for that matter, Richard. My father stiffened. What is that supposed to mean? This was it, the moment for the final revelation. Grandpa nodded to me and I handed him the folder labeled Richard Truth. There's something you should know, Grandpa said, his voice softening slightly. Something I should have told you long ago. He removed the birth certificate and adoption papers, placing them carefully on the table between them. My father stared at them uncomprehendingly at first, then with growing horror as understanding dawned. What is this? He whispered, though the documents clearly answered his question. You were born to Eleanor Winters, my secretary, in 1958, Grandpa explained gently. Your mother, the woman you knew as your mother, couldn't have children. We adopted you when you were 3 months old. Eleanor received financial support to start a new life in California with the agreement that she would not contact you. My father's hands trembled as he picked up the birth certificate. This is some kind of trick. To justify cutting me out. It's the truth, Grandpa said simply. I have DNA tests to confirm it if you require them. My entire life. My father murmured, shock evident in every line of his face. Everything I thought I knew. Your mother loved you completely, Grandpa assured him. That was never in question. We agreed never to tell you because she didn't want you to feel different or less than fully ours. And you're telling me now because… My father's shock was giving way to anger. Because it's time you understood something fundamental. Family isn't about blood or inheritance or financial worth. It's about values, love, and mutual respect. Grandpa leaned forward intently. I gave you everything, Richard, every advantage, every opportunity. And somewhere along the way, you came to believe that money and status were what defined our family. He gestured toward me. Then you perpetuated that belief with your own daughters. Vanessa met your narrow definition of success, so she received your approval, your financial support, your love. Merritt chose a different path, one you couldn't quantify on a balance sheet, so she received your disappointment. My father looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I saw confusion in his eyes, and beneath it a flicker of something else, doubt perhaps. Or recognition. Do you know why I'm leaving controlling interest to Merritt, Grandpa continued. Not to punish you or Vanessa, but because she understands what I failed to teach you, that true worth isn't measured in dollars. That family support should be unconditional. That the legacy I want for Callaway Construction isn't just profit but positive impact. The room fell silent as my father absorbed these multiple blows to his identity, his authority, his worldview. Bradley remained unnervingly quiet, observing everything with calculating eyes. Finally, my father spoke, his voice barely audible. Does Vanessa know about any of this? No, I answered. This isn't about hurting Vanessa. She's still your daughter, still part of this family. My father stood abruptly. I need time to process all of this. He gathered the documents with shaking hands and moved toward the door. I don't know what to say to you right now, he said to Grandpa. To either of you. As he reached the door, Grandpa called after him. Richard, blood doesn't make a family. How you treat people does. I hope you'll remember that when you've had time to think. My father paused but didn't turn around. Then he walked out, Bradley following quickly behind. When the door closed, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I began but couldn't find the words to finish. Necessary, Grandpa supplied, looking suddenly exhausted. And long overdue. He reached for my hand. The hard part begins now, Merritt. Are you ready? I squeezed his hand. As long as we're in this together. What neither of us could have predicted was how my father would respond once the initial shock wore off, or how Bradley's quiet observation during our confrontation would lead to consequences none of us anticipated. 3 weeks passed in tense silence. My father didn't call. My mother texted daily with surface-level updates, but avoided any mention of the revelations or their aftermath. Vanessa left increasingly confused voicemails, clearly aware that something significant had happened, but not privy to the details. Grandpa remained at my apartment, improving steadily under the care of the visiting nurse. We established a comfortable routine, breakfast together, work on our respective projects during the day, dinner with classic movies in the evening. He shared stories about the early days of building his company, about my grandmother, about parts of our family history I'd never known. For all the external tension, these weeks with Grandpa were a gift I hadn't anticipated. Then came the email from my father's assistant, Mr. Callaway requests your presence at a family dinner Friday at 7 p.m. All family members will be in attendance. It's time, Grandpa said when I showed him the message. He's had space to process. Now we'll see what he's decided to do with it. Friday evening arrived with a sense of foreboding. As we pulled up to my parents' house, Grandpa insisting on accompanying me despite his still recovering health, I noticed all the cars already parked in the circular driveway, my mother's Mercedes, my father's Audi Vanessa, and Bradley's Range Rover. Everyone's here, I murmured, helping Grandpa from the car. Good, he replied simply. Best to do this all at once. My mother opened the door before we could ring the bell, her expression a careful mask of neutrality. Dad, Merritt. Come in. Everyone's in the dining room. The formal dining room was rarely used except for holidays and special occasions. Tonight, it was set with the best china and crystal candles lit down the center of the table. My father sat at the head with Vanessa and Bradley to his right. An empty chair for my mother was at the opposite end with 2 places set on the left side for Grandpa and me. As we entered, my father stood. He looked different somehow, older perhaps, but also more human than I'd seen him in years. The arrogant CEO demeanor had diminished, replaced by something more vulnerable. Dad. Merritt. Thank you for coming, he said, formally waiting until we were seated before continuing. I've asked everyone here tonight because there are matters that affect our entire family that need to be addressed. Vanessa glanced between us all, confusion evident. Would someone please tell me what's going on? Everyone's been acting strange for weeks. My father took a deep breath. Vanessa, there have been some revelations recently. About our family history. About the company. About decisions your mother and I have made regarding you and your sister. Over the next hour, as the first course was served and barely touched, my father methodically explained everything. His adoption, the true ownership structure of Callaway Construction, Grandpa's decision to leave controlling interest to me, and finally the imbalance in how he and my mother had treated Vanessa and me throughout our lives. Vanessa's expressions ranged from shock to disbelief, to a dawning comprehension that seemed to physically alter her posture as the truth settled in. So, Mom and Dad gave me millions while telling Merritt to fend for herself, she summarized bluntly, and now Grandpa is giving her control of the company to balance the scales. That's a simplification, but essentially correct, Grandpa. Confirmed. Vanessa turned to me, her eyes searching. Did you know? All those years when I was getting everything and you were getting nothing? Did you hate me for it? The question caught me off guard. I'd expected anger accusations, not this vulnerable inquiry about my feelings toward her. I never hated you, Vanessa, I said honestly. You didn't create the dynamic. You just benefited from it. Still, she pressed, I participated. I accepted everything without questioning why you weren't receiving the same. I'm sorry, Merritt. The simple apology, something I'd never expected from my confident, perfect sister, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. My father cleared his throat. I've spent these weeks reflecting on my life, my values, my understanding of family. Learning about my own adoption forced me to reconsider everything I thought I knew about legacy and bloodlines. He looked directly at me. Merritt, I owe you an apology. A lifetime of apologies, really. I measured your worth by standards that were shallow and ultimately meaningless. I failed to see the remarkable person you are because I was too focused on achievements I could brag about at country club dinners. My mother wiped tears from her eyes. We both did, honey. We're both so sorry. I sat in stunned silence, never having expected this level of self-awareness or contrition from my parents. As for the company, my father continued, turning to Grandpa. You were right. I've been running it with profit as the only metric that matters. That's not the legacy you built, not the values you tried to instill. Bradley, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. I feel I should acknowledge my role in this situation as well. I encouraged Richard's focus on financial metrics above all else. I pushed for the cryptocurrency venture because it promised quick returns, not because it aligned with the company's core values. Grandpa studied Bradley thoughtfully. That's surprisingly self-aware, Bradley. Near-death experiences have a way of clarifying priorities, Bradley replied. After Richard told me everything, I realized I've been approaching family and business all wrong. The aggressive pursuit of wealth at the expense of relationships. It's not sustainable or satisfying. My father reached for a folder beside his plate and slid it toward me. Merritt, I've drafted a proposal, a restructuring of both the company and our family finances. Inside was a comprehensive plan, a trust that would equalize the financial support between Vanessa and me, returning half of the $6.5 million to be placed in a trust for me. A new corporate governance structure that would respect Grandpa's wish for me to hold controlling interest, but create an advisory board that included both my father and Vanessa. And most surprisingly, a fund dedicated to documenting the company's impact on communities, where we built a perfect integration of my photojournalism skills with the family business. Your photography has always been about seeing people, really seeing them, my father explained. Our company builds structures, but we've never properly documented the human impact of our work. The communities transform the people housed, the local economies affected. I think your eye for humanity is exactly what we've been missing. I studied the proposal emotion, making it difficult to focus on the details. This is unexpected. Is it acceptable? My father asked, a note of uncertainty in his voice that I'd never heard before. I looked at Grandpa, who nodded slightly, his eyes warm with approval of this turn of events. Yes, I said finally. It's a good start. Vanessa reached across the table to squeeze my hand. I want to be part of rebuilding our relationship too. Not just through business structures, but as sisters. Real sisters who support each other. As dinner progressed, the conversation gradually shifted to more practical matters: how to implement these changes, the legal processes required, the timeline for transition. By dessert, a tentative warmth had returned to our family interactions, fragile but promising. After coffee, as everyone moved to the living room, Grandpa pulled me aside. "Are you okay with all this?" he asked quietly. "It's not exactly the plan we had." I considered the question carefully. I think it's better, actually. Less about revenge or evening scores, more about creating something new together, something healthier. He smiled, patting my hand. "That's why you were always the right choice, Merritt. You understand that the point was never the money or the power. It was about recognition, respect, and rebuilding a family based on the right values." As we rejoined the others, I felt a sense of closure that had eluded me for decades. The wounds weren't fully healed, that would take time and consistent effort from all of us, but the healing had genuinely begun. 6 months later, I stood in a gallery in downtown Boston, surrounded by the fruits of our family's transformation. The exhibition, titled "Foundations: The Human Side of Building," showcased my photographic documentation of Callaway Construction's impact across New England. Workers whose livelihoods depended on our projects, families in the affordable housing developments we'd recently prioritized, community spaces revitalized by our restoration work. My parents moved through the crowd, proudly introducing me as our daughter, the artist who's helping us see our company's true purpose. Vanessa, holding her son, pointed out to him the photographs of construction sites where Aunt Merritt captured the people who build our world. Bradley surprisingly had become one of my biggest advocates within the company, restructuring financial priorities to support more community-focused projects. And Grandpa, now fully recovered and more energetic than he'd been in years, stood in the center of it all, watching with satisfaction as his true legacy unfolded, not a company or a fortune, but a family that had found its way back to what really mattered. What started with betrayal and favoritism had transformed into something I never expected: Genuine healing and justice that served everyone, not just me. Not a revenge story, but a redemption one. Thank you so much for staying with me through this entire journey. If my family's story of transformation resonated with you, I'd love to hear about similar experiences you might have had with family dynamics or unexpected life lessons in the comments below. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed this story of justice and family healing, and subscribe for more real-life dramas with surprising twists. Share this with someone who might need to hear that family relationships can heal and transform even after years of damage. I'm grateful to all of you for listening, and I hope my story reminds you that sometimes the most satisfying resolution isn't revenge but the restoration of what matters most.